All right, let's get right into it. If you really want to get a handle on how our economy works, it's funny, but the best way to start is by looking at all the times it's just completely, spectacularly broken. So today, we're going to dissect some of history's biggest financial bubbles and see the patterns that just keep coming back time and time again.
You see, what's so fascinating is that pretty much every major crisis, from the Great Depression all the way to the dot-com crash, they all follow this surprisingly similar script. And if we can understand that script, we can get a much clearer picture of what might be happening right now.
So every story has a beginning, right? Well, for a financial bubble, that beginning is almost always a perfect storm of three key ingredients. You need a game-changing new technology, a whole flood of easy money, and a really powerful story that just captures everyone's imagination.
It's honestly wild how this pattern repeats. Think about the 1920s. The revolutionary tech was the assembly line. It was fueled by this brand new thing called consumer loans, and it sold the story of a new era of prosperity for everyone. Fast forward 70 years and boom, it's the internet. But this time it's supercharged by low interest rates. See, when rates are low, borrowing is cheap, and that floods the system with cash that's looking for a home. And it just pours fuel on these new ideas. Different details, but it's the exact same DNA.
And we saw it happen again in the 2000s. Only this time, the new thing wasn't really a technology, it was more of an idea. That owning a home was the absolute cornerstone of the American dream. And yep, you guessed it, low interest rates and easy credit policies poured gasoline on that fire, setting the stage for the 2008 financial crisis.
So this brings us to Act 2, the bubble itself. This is that phase where rational optimism just kind of tips over into what they call irrational exuberance. Excitement takes over, and the price of something becomes completely disconnected from its actual real-world value.
And the engine that drives this whole phase is one thing: speculation. It's that moment when people stop caring about whether a company actually makes a profit or if a house is a good place to live. The only thing that matters is the belief that you can sell it to somebody else for a higher price tomorrow. That's it.
And here's what that speculative mindset looked like. Back in the 20s, people were borrowing incredible amounts of money. Get this, 40% of all consumer debt, just to gamble on stocks. Then in the 90s, you had startups proudly telling everyone that profits were for old, boring companies. And in the 2000s, well, Wall Street wizards took the riskiest home loans you could imagine, these subprime mortgages, packaged them all up, and somehow convinced the world they were rock-solid, safe investments.
And if you want to see just how detached from reality things got, just look at this number. In 1999, at the absolute peak of the dot-com mania, the top 199 internet companies collectively lost over $6 billion. And yet their stock market valuations were soaring into the hundreds of billions. It made absolutely no sense.
Well, of course, a party like that can't last forever. Act 3 is the inevitable burst. Eventually, some little event, a piece of bad news, a tiny rise in interest rates, pricks the bubble. Confidence just shatters, and the panic that follows is often just as irrational as the hype that came before it. The 1929 crash is the classic example, and wow, it happened breathtakingly fast. In just a matter of days, the market went into a complete freefall. But the really crucial part is that the slide didn't stop. It just kept going for 3 long years until nearly 90% of the market's value had just been wiped out.
And it doesn't matter if it's 1929, the dot-com bust in 2000, or the mortgage crisis in 2008, the process is always the same. Panic selling turns these hyped-up assets into worthless paper, like overnight. Fortunes just evaporate. And most importantly, the financial crisis doesn't stay on Wall Street. It bleeds into the real economy. And that's when people start losing their jobs and their homes.
And that leads us to our final act, the aftermath. This is where we see the devastating human cost of the whole collapse, but it's also where we see societies try to pick up the pieces and hopefully make sure it never happens again. Just look at the Great Depression to see the sheer scale of the devastation. At its peak, 1 in every 4 working Americans had no job. Just try to wrap your head around that. It's a number so large it's almost impossible to comprehend the level of suffering behind it.
And please, don't think this is all just ancient history. After the 2008 crisis, nearly 9 million Americans lost their jobs. These bubbles have catastrophic real-world consequences for millions of families, even today.
But from that wreckage, change often emerges. The Great Depression gave us fundamental safety nets we still rely on, like bank insurance and Social Security. The dot-com bust, and this is really interesting, It left behind all the fiber optic cables and server farms that companies like YouTube and Facebook would later use to build the internet we know. And of course, the 2008 crisis led to massive new financial regulations. So in a strange way, each crisis kind of lays the foundation for the next chapter of the economy.
So after walking through this whole four-act play, the boom, the bubble, the burst, and the aftermath, we have to ask the big question. With all the hype and literally trillions of dollars pouring into artificial intelligence, are we just watching the same script play out all over again?
Okay, let's look at the arguments. The bear case, the pessimistic view that, yeah, it's a bubble, points out that most AI companies are losing incredible amounts of money, just like back in the dot-com era. They also warn about this thing called round-tripping cash, where investment money just gets cycled right back to big tech for computing power, which creates this illusion of revenue. But the bull case, the optimistic view, says, no, this time is different. The AI boom is funded by huge, profitable tech giants, not fragile little startups. And unlike the early internet, AI already has practical, real-world uses for millions of people today. So, which story do you believe?
We've seen this pattern repeat itself for a century now. We've seen how new tech and easy money can create a frenzy, how that frenzy can detach from reality, and how painful the eventual correction can be. So if we are in an AI bubble, the only question left to ask is, what's going to be the pin that finally makes it pop?